They say everything changes when you start answering calls after midnight. I used to believe that was just about emergencies or bad habits, but now I know it's something else, something quieter, something I wasn't ready to name until he called. It was 12:47 a.m. the first time my boss, Cole, rang me. I remember the exact time because I was half asleep, sprawled across my couch, one sock on, one off, watching some forgettable documentary on coral reefs. My phone buzzed against my thigh, and when I saw his name glowing on the screen, my breath caught not in fear, but something closer to anticipation. "Hey, sorry, did I wake you?" His voice was low, quieter than usual. Double quotes, no, I'm just up, a lie, but one I told without hesitation. That was 2 months ago. Since then, the calls have become a pattern, not every night, but often enough that when the hour approaches, I'm already glancing at my phone, and when it doesn't ring, something inside me feels strangely disappointed. I work in a digital branding agency downtown, nothing glamorous, just long hours, stubborn clients, and a team that lives on cold brew and sarcasm. Cole runs the place. He's 36, confident in a way that never tries too hard, and always a little too focused, a little too calm. I joined last year as a junior content strategist, straight out of grad school and desperate to prove myself. Somehow I ended up being assigned directly under him. He's not just my boss. He's the reason I stayed. Cole never micromanaged. Instead, he challenged me, called me out when I overthought, sent me playlists during late-night deadlines, and once, when I looked like I was ready to collapse, handed me a granola bar and said, "Eat. You're no good to me, Dad." He always says things like that, half jokes, half concerned, and for months, I told myself that was all it was. But the midnight calls changed something. They were never really about work. Sometimes he'd ask about a campaign idea. Sometimes he just wanted to vent. Other times it was silence. Just needed to hear a normal voice. He once said, I told him I wasn't that normal, and he chuckled. That laugh still sticks to my ribs. Last week, he asked if I'd join him on a short weekend trip for a client presentation. Just the two of us. Some beachside resort 2 hours south, nothing fancy, but good enough to impress the people with money, he joked. I said yes before I even knew what the date was, so now here I am, bags half-packed, standing in my apartment. At 11 p.m. the night before we leave, trying to figure out if bringing cologne makes me seem too eager. My hand lingers on a worn t-shirt, his favorite on me. I think he once called it that soft, sky-colored thing when I wore it during a work-from-home video call. I fold it carefully and set it on top. I tell myself this is just a work trip, a client thing, a chance to escape the office grind. But deep down, buried under layers of logic and hesitation, I know I'm hoping for something more. Maybe not a confession, maybe not even anything physical, but maybe just a look, a pause, a moment. I've noticed the way his gaze lingers on me when he thinks I'm not paying attention, the way he leans in slightly when we talk, the way he always texts me when he arrives home after a long day. Made it alive. You, I answer every time. I don't know what that means yet, but I know I want to find out. Tomorrow might change everything, or maybe it already has. Cole picked me up the next morning in his matte black SUV, punctual. As always, I was 5 minutes early, but he was already leaning against the hood, sipping coffee from a stainless steel travel mug, dressed in a black button-down rolled up at the sleeves and jeans that fit just enough to make me rethink my seatbelt strategy. Packed light, he said, nodding at my single duffel. Figured I wouldn't need a tux, I replied, tossing it into the back seat. He smirked. You'd be surprised what rich people expect near a pool. That was how it always was between us, casual sarcasm, the kind that hid something gentler beneath the surface. The drive was 2 hours, but with Cole, it never felt long. Our conversations wandered. Music we hated, podcasts we both secretly loved, and that one client who kept asking us to make it more viral. Do you ever think about quitting? I asked at one point. As we passed the last gas station on the edge of the city, he glanced at me, then back at the road. Yeah, about twice a day. What stops you? He smiled slightly. You mostly. I laughed a little too quickly. Shut up, I'm serious, he said, eyes still forward. You remind me why I started this. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just looked out the window and pretended not to feel the way my stomach fluttered. When we arrived, the resort was a sunlit stretch of sand and minimalist villas, lined with palms. Our presentation wasn't until the following morning, so we had the day to prep and relax. The front desk handed us key cards and matching canvas tote bags, filled with branded towels and sunscreen. Cole looked at the room assignments and frowned. They only had one room left with 2 beds, the others under renovation. I shrugged, trying to keep my voice steady. Fine by me. I don't snore. He raised an eyebrow. I do. Guess I'll find out. We found the room bright and breezy, with 2 queen beds, a wide balcony overlooking the ocean, and a small lounge area that had clearly never been used. I claimed the bed by the window, and Cole dropped his bag on the other without comment. Later that evening, we sat on the beach with drinks from the bar, watching the sun dip behind the waves. He was more relaxed here, barefoot in the sand, sleeves rolled up further, eyes squinting at the horizon. Do you ever think about doing something else? he asked suddenly. Like quitting. I echoed with a grin. He shook his head. No, like starting over, somewhere quieter. I looked at him then, really looked. The usually unreadable lines in his face softened. The waves caught glints of gold in his hair. He looked younger, or maybe just tired. Sometimes, I said honestly, but I think I'd miss the noise. He turned to face me. I think I'd miss you. That silence afterward, it wasn't awkward. It was thick, charged. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Instead, I changed the subject. Do you remember our first client meeting together? The one where the projector broke and I accidentally clicked open my grocery list instead of the pitch deck. He laughed. You had frozen waffles and men's shampoo in size 72 font. I grinned. And you said, let's pivot. 2 lifestyle essentials. We were quiet again. But this time it felt like we were both sitting with something neither of us knew how to unpack. That night, back in the room, I was folding the edge of my blanket over and over when Cole came out of the bathroom, in nothing but a towel around his waist, brushing his teeth. My brain short-circuited for a moment. I looked away, but not quickly enough. You okay? He asked, mouth half foamed. Yeah, just. I swallowed. Didn't expect the towel scene tonight. He laughed, deep and real. Relax. Not trying to seduce you yet. I turned red so fast I could feel it rise up my neck. He didn't say anything else. Just disappeared back into the bathroom, leaving me unsure if he was joking or not. When he came back out, dressed this time, we sat on our beds, laptops open, reviewing slides and notes for the pitch. Somewhere between debating fonts and messaging tone, he looked up at me and said, you always get this crease between your brows when you're focused. Right there, he pointed. Makes you look like you're trying to solve world peace. I touched my forehead reflexively. It's called trying to make you proud. He didn't laugh this time, just looked at me longer than necessary. I already am. That night, when the lights were off and the only sound was the distant hush of waves, I lay awake in bed, facing the wall. From the other side of the room, I heard him shift. Then, softly, you asleep. My heart skipped. No, a pause. I'm glad you came. Me too. I wanted to say, me too, in every way I probably shouldn't be. Instead, I just said, me too, and hoped he could hear everything I couldn't say. The presentation went off without a hitch. We nailed every point, even the ones we'd improvised during the Q&A. Cole had a way of commanding a room, voice low but confident, eyes scanning just enough to make people lean in. I watched him more than I watched the crowd. Maybe I always did. When it ended, we were thanked politely, even offered champagne by one of the board members. But Cole declined with a half smile. We'll celebrate when it means something, he said to me afterward. I didn't ask what that meant. I just followed him outside, where the breeze had picked up. We were supposed to stay another night and head back in the morning. But just as we were returning to the resort, Cole got the call our client's system had glitched, and the deck we sent needed resubmitting with new file formatting. Classic agency panic. They wanted it tonight. Of course they do, Cole muttered, already digging for his keys. We need my external drive back at the office. That's 2 hours away, I said. I know, but I don't trust uploading from here. He looked at me. You okay to drive back tonight? I'm fine if you are. So we checked out early, caffeine in hand, and hit the road just before dusk. The highway was quiet, mostly empty. We were about halfway home when Cole frowned, glancing at the dash. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered. The gas light blinked yellow. He tapped the screen. 0 stations for miles. You told me you filled up before we left. I thought I did, he said, rubbing his jaw. Must have been the other car, damn it. We pulled off at the next exit, a 2-lane road that felt more like a forgotten vein in the state's transportation map. No lights, no signs, just dense trees and the occasional rusted mailbox. Eventually, the car stuttered, then stopped. He turned to me with a sheepish look. Guess I owe you that champagne after all. I let out a slow breath. You didn't bring a charger, did you? Of course not. That would have been too smart. There was no cell service, no nearby motels, just us, the parked car, and the quiet hum of the evening pressing in. Cole reclined his seat. All right, this is now officially a team-building exercise, where we learn how to not commit murder in close quarters. He grinned. Exactly. We waited for a tow truck, even though we weren't sure when one would arrive. The company's voicemail had taken our message and hung up. All we could do was wait. In the meantime, Cole stretched out, hands behind his head, eyes closed. His shirt pulled slightly where the buttons sat, revealing a soft hint of chest hair. I tried not to stare. Failed. I'm not sleeping, he said suddenly, eyes still closed. Just thinking about you. I froze. Me, well, us. He cracked one eye open. We've been working together for almost a year, sharing weird playlists, making bad coffee. You've seen me at my worst. I've seen worse, I mumbled. Not from me. His voice dropped just a little on that last part. Not flirtatious, just raw. I looked away, out the windshield. The trees looked like shadows stacked on shadows. I like working with you, I said quietly. He sat up slightly. That all. The question lingered between us. It wasn't a dare. It wasn't even suggestive. It was real, and I couldn't answer, not because I didn't know, but because I did. I changed the subject. You cold? He blinked, like I'd just broken whatever spell we were in. I unzipped my hoodie and handed it over. Here, you sure it's not that cold? He pulled it on without protest. It was a size too small for him, stretched across his chest and shoulders, the sleeves ending a little above his wrists. Something about it looked intimate, like my scent was wrapped around him now. I turned toward the window again, this time closing my eyes. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. At some point I felt the shift the armrest between us creaked. I opened my eyes. Cole was leaning slightly closer, head resting against the back of the seat, eyes on me. I shouldn't be saying this, he said. I swallowed. Then don't. I know, he said, but I keep looking at you, and wanting to say something real. My heart was pounding now, a soft thud inside my ribs. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I think I've been calling you at midnight because it's the only time I feel like I can stop pretending, he said. And every time you answer, it's like I'm not alone anymore. His hand was resting on the console now, inches from mine. His pinky brushed against my knuckle, soft, intentional, not a mistake. And still, I didn't move, because part of me wanted to close the distance, and the other part, the scared part, was screaming, if you do, nothing will ever be the same. I don't want to mess this up, I whispered. We work together. You're my boss. If we cross that line, he nodded slowly. I know. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loud with everything we couldn't say. Then softly, gently, his fingers slid over mine, interlaced. No pressure, just warmth. I let him. Not because I was ready, but because I didn't want to pretend anymore either. The tow truck didn't arrive until nearly 3 a.m. By then, we'd stopped pretending to sleep. The windows fogged from breath and the chill outside, and we sat side by side, quietly listening to the muted tick of the engine cooling down. Cole's hand was still in mine, our fingers resting together on the console like it had always been that way. He hadn't let go, and I hadn't pulled back. When the headlights finally appeared in the distance, we separated slowly, almost reluctantly. I rubbed my palms on my thighs, trying to summon some version of calm. You good? He asked, his voice hoarse. Yeah, I lied. Fine. He glanced at me, eyes searching. You sure? No, but I nodded anyway. We got towed to a nearby gas station with a sleepy mechanic who filled our tank and sent us on our way without asking too many questions. We didn't talk much during the rest of the drive, not because there was nothing to say, but because we didn't know how to say any of it by the time we reached the office. The sun was just starting to smudge the sky. Cole parked in our usual spot and sat there for a moment, keys still in the ignition, engine ticking softly. We should go inside, I murmured. Yeah, he said, but he didn't move. I turned to him. Cole. His name felt different now, more fragile, like speaking it aloud gave way to everything we'd danced around all night. He finally looked at me, and for the first time he didn't look calm. He looked uncertain, vulnerable even. I wasn't going to say anything, he said, voice low. I told myself this was just admiration, just respect. But then you started showing up in my thoughts at 2 a.m., and it stopped feeling professional. I swallowed hard. My pulse thrummed against my neck. He laughed once dry, nervous. I'd stare at your email drafts longer than I should. I'd wait for your messages just to see your name pop up, and then I started hearing your laugh when you weren't around. That's when I knew I was in trouble. Cole, I said, and something cracked in my chest. I know I'm older, he said quickly. I'm your boss. It's not ideal. I've thought about every reason why this would be a mistake, but none of that has stopped the way I feel. Not once. There. It was .real .exposed. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. I looked at his hand resting on his thigh, thumb twitching slightly, like he was bracing for the worst. My own hands were clenched in my lap. When I finally spoke, my voice was quiet. I used to pretend your calls were normal, but everyone got them. That midnight was just part of the job. He looked at me, eyes narrowing slightly, listening, but then I started waiting for them. I'd lie awake and wonder if tonight would be one of those nights. And when it wasn't, I shook my head, smiling faintly. It felt like something was missing. His shoulders dropped, just a little. I could feel the tension unspooling between us, thread by thread. I didn't know how to say it either, I admitted. I kept telling myself I couldn't ruin what we had, that I shouldn't cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But every time you looked at me, it felt like you already knew. His expression shifted, eyes soft, lips slightly parted. I think I've been falling for you since the first time you offered me that granola bar, I said with a laugh that caught in my throat. It was the worst kind. Raisin, but I kept it. He laughed quietly and looked down at the steering wheel like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. You kept it? He asked. I still have the wrapper tucked in my desk drawer. Desk? When something shifted, he turned to me slowly, reaching out, not rushed, not desperate, just honest. His fingers brushed my cheek, tentative, like he needed permission to go further. Can I? Yes, I whispered, and then he kissed me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't fireworks or movie score passion. It was slow, hesitant, like we were both discovering what we'd already known. His hand cupped my jaw gently, anchoring me there as our lips met. I felt him exhale against me, a quiet relief. The kiss deepened, but never lost its tenderness. It said everything we hadn't The nights, the silence, the stolen glances, the not quite jokes, all of it. When we pulled apart, he didn't speak right away. His forehead leaned against mine, and we just breathed together in the stillness of the parked car. I don't want to pretend anymore, he said softly. Me neither. He pulled back to look at me, his thumb tracing a light path along my cheek. This won't be easy, I know. There are rules. People might talk. I don't care, I said. Not if it means I get to keep hearing your voice at midnight. He smiled at that. You'll hear it at every hour, if you want. I leaned into him, then just enough to rest my head against his shoulder. I've wanted this for so long, I whispered. His arm came around me, holding me there. Close, safe, real. We'll figure it out, he said into my hair. One step at a time. We didn't go into the office right away. Instead, we sat there in the parked SUV, the morning light crawling across the dashboard like it was giving us permission to pause just a little longer. The world outside stirred quietly. Birds called. The street lamps flicked off one by one. But inside that car, time stretched out like it belonged to us. Cole's arm was still around my shoulders, his body warm beside me. I leaned into him fully now, no longer pretending to be casual. And he didn't pull away. He rested his chin lightly on my head, exhaling through his nose like he'd been holding his breath for months. So I said, my voice muffled slightly against his chest. Does this mean I get to call you after midnight now? He chuckled, low and rough. You've always been allowed. I was just the coward who used work as an excuse. You, a coward. I leaned back and gave him a look. You literally run a company and once told a boardroom full of execs that their rebrand looked like a sad dating app. He smiled. Still the truth. I laughed and nudged him gently in the ribs. He caught my wrist before I could pull back and laced our fingers together again. Everything felt easier, not simple, but honest. We were sitting in the same seats, in the same car, as we had 100 times before. But now, there was no pretending, no denying, just us. I'm not going to lie, he said after a moment. This could be complicated. Because you're my boss, I said, already bracing. Because I care about you, he corrected, turning serious. And I don't want this to become something we regret if the world outside makes it harder. I nodded slowly. We don't have to announce it to the team, not right away. We can figure it out as we go. I don't want to hide you, he said, but I also want to protect what we have before people start turning it into gossip. I understood that. In our world, everything was optics. One misread moment could become a whispered rumor. But here, now, I wasn't thinking about them. I'm okay going slow, I said. I just don't want to go back to how things were. His eyes softened. Neither do I. We finally made it inside the office a little after 7 a.m. It was still empty. The lights flickering on as we entered, bathing everything in a warm hum. Our desks looked the same. The air smelled like stale coffee and recycled air, and yet everything was different. As we passed the kitchenette, Cole reached for a mug from the top shelf, the one I always used, and handed it to me without asking. Just a small, silent gesture, but I felt it. Later, as we sat side by side reviewing the resubmitted files, he kept sneaking glances at me when he thought I wasn't looking. Once, I caught him, and he didn't look away. What? I asked, raising a brow. Nothing, he said, grinning. You just look like someone I'm going to have a hard time pretending not to love. I blinked, stunned. The word hadn't been said yet, not clearly. But there it was, hanging in the space between us. I didn't say it back. Not because I didn't feel it, but because I wanted to say it when it was quiet again. When it was just us. No laptops, no screens, just realness. Still, I reached out and tapped his foot under the table. Careful. You keep saying things like that, and I'm gonna fall harder. He leaned in just a little. Good, then maybe I won't be the only one. We worked like that for another hour, playful, focused, stealing glances like teenagers. It wasn't just romance blooming. It was relief that we'd made it here. That all the tension, the unsaid things, the fear it hadn't been one-sided. As we packed up to head home, Cole walked beside me to the elevator. The office was still mostly empty, just a few early risers trickling in. He hesitated by the door, then reached out and lightly brushed my knuckles with his dot. No one saw it, but I felt it everywhere. When you get home, he said quietly, text me when you're settled. I always do, he smiled. I know. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped in. Heart thudding in my chest. This was new, this was real, and for the first time in months, maybe longer, I wasn't afraid of what came next. 2 weeks passed. That it wasn't perfect, but it was ours. At the office, nothing really changed on the surface. Cole was still the same steady force in meetings. Still offered dry commentary during brainstorms. Still drank his coffee black and scowled at branding buzzwords like synergy and authenticity. But behind closed doors on rooftop lunch breaks, during late nights spent reworking client decks, and yes, after midnight calls, the space between us felt different. Beth, safe, intimate, real. We never made any grand declarations to the team. Not yet, but we stopped pretending when we were alone. There was something quiet and sacred about keeping it just ours, tucked into the rhythm of our daily lives like a secret only we knew. One Friday evening, long after most of the office had cleared out. Cole and I stayed behind finishing a proposal. The glow of the city spilled through the windows, and the only sound was the hum of the vending machine 2 floors below. He looked up from his laptop and said, "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" "That thing with your lip? You bite it when you're second-guessing yourself." I laughed. "You watch me too much." "I watch you just enough." I leaned back in my chair, letting the screen blur in front of me. "Do you ever think about where this is going?" He paused for a second before answering. "Every day, and I don't want it to stop." He stood, walked around the table, and crouched in front of me, resting his hands on the arms of my chair. His voice was softer now. "I know we started in the gray. I know I'm your boss. And there are policies, perceptions, all of that. But I also know how I feel when I'm around you. And I'm not willing to lose that just because the world wants clean lines." I looked at him, really looked. This wasn't the Cole I first met. Not the one who ran meetings like a surgeon or dropped dry one-liners over morning coffee. This was someone who had let his walls fall, who was looking at me not as an employee but as something closer. "Something important. I don't care about clean lines either," I said. "I just care that you're in the picture." That made him smile. He reached into his pocket and pulled something out, a crumpled, slightly torn granola bar wrapper. My eyes widened. "You kept that?" He nodded. "Found it in the bottom drawer. I thought maybe it was just trash. Then I remembered what you said, that you'd kept yours. And I guess I didn't want to throw it away either." I took it from him gently, my fingers brushing his. A stupid wrapper. But now, it felt like a symbol of the moment it all started, of the small things that led us here. He stood up slowly, leaned down, and kissed me on the forehead. Soft, unrushed. "We'll go at our own pace," he said. "We'll deal with the world when we're ready. And until then?" I asked. He offered me his hand. "Until then, we just keep choosing each other." I took it, no hesitation this time. We left the office together, the night stretching out ahead of us like a promise. As we stepped into the elevator, his fingers found mine again. He didn't let go. Outside, the street was quiet. Traffic lights blinked lazily, and the air held that perfect in-between temperature where you don't notice the cold or the warmth, just presence. We walked side by side for a while, not toward any destination, just walking. At one point I bumped his shoulder lightly. "You think we're going to be one of those couples who meet at work and end up in a LinkedIn article someday?" He smirked. "God, I hope not." We both laughed, and then we stopped at the corner waiting for the light. I looked over at him, the man who used to feel unreachable, the one I kept at a careful distance, not because I didn't want him but because I wanted him too much. Now, he stood here, right beside me, no distance, no pretense, just us. And even though I didn't know what came next, if we'd stumble, if the world would question us, if the lines would blur too much, I knew one thing with quiet certainty: this was just the beginning.